Ghosts, monsters, vampires, haunted houses, all of the spooky things that are so much fun to read. That's what we're talking about today on the Rose at Home channel. I'm Rose, I'm at home, and I am so incredibly glad you have decided to join me to read the books that go bump in the night, that make you wonder, did I lock that door? Does my house normally make that noise? So we're going to start with my absolute favorite horror novel. It is part horror, part mystery, and it is Simone St. James' The Sundown Motel, and I think I've talked about this one before, but if you have not read this, this is perfect for October. This is ghosts. Or is it ghosts? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's rumors. Maybe it's a haunted hotel. Who knows? So this is the story of two young women in alternate timelines. One is working the front desk at the Sundown Motel, which is rumored to be haunted, when suddenly she disappears. 20 years later, or roundabouts, her niece comes back to the Sundown Motel to try to find out what happened to her aunt, whose disappearance has absolutely shattered her mother's life. And she also gets a job at the Sundown Motel, and hijinks ensue to the nth degree. Exponential hijinks. It's wonderful. It's wonderfully well crafted. Both timelines keep you on the edge of your seat. There's not one that's better than the other. They both work beautifully in tandem. So if that sounds awesome, put this on your October TBR because it totally should be there. The second pick with ghosts is a pick that is something that almost straddles the middle grade into YA while remaining still so entertaining for adults. And it's really, really hard to do that, but Neil Gaiman did, and it is The Graveyard Book. This is the story of what at the beginning is a baby, and for most of the book is a very young man. When he is an infant, his family is massacred, but he, as a toddler, manages to get away, and the ghosts at a cemetery near his home take him in, shelter him, and he lives with the ghosts. He learns about the ghost society and how to get by kind of as a ghost, even though he is not one. Again, we've got lots of hijinks ensuing. The man who killed his family is still searching for him. We've got all of these wonderful ghosts with all of their great personalities and some of them not so great personalities. We've got all of this with a coming of age story for this young man. It's so good. I love this book. If you haven't read it, don't let the youngness of it put you off. Pick it up. It's great. Okay, so we've already talked about the ghosts. Now let's talk about the vampires. We are going to start with Silvia Moreno-Garcia's Certain Dark Things. This is wonderful. I'm going to have to be vague though because I read it when it came out, which was 8 years ago or so. From what I remember, this takes place in Mexico City. We have a human young man who is kind of part of the incredibly poor underworld. He kind of makes himself invisible to avoid things. He sells garbage. He ends up meeting and becoming involved with a vampire. In this book, there are different types of vampires and they work as different gangs, and it keeps it super interesting. But this vampire is on the run from some different kind of vampires, and we have this human who's trying to help her. It's really interesting. It's really action-packed. It's so good. Even 8 years later, I still remember how much I loved it, even if I don't remember a ton of plot specifics, but I totally, if you like vampire books, I totally suggest that you give this one a shot. And now for a different type of vampire. I'm going to call this a vampire novel, and this is Stephen King's Dr. Sleep. If you are familiar with The Shining, this is kinda, sorta, in a way, a far in the future sequel. The little boy in The Shining, Danny, is our main character here as an adult. And the plot of this is that it's decades later, he's an adult, and he runs into a young girl who also has the shine like he had when he was a small child. But there is a group of, I'm going to call them vampires. They're kind of people, but they basically eat they take children who shine and they eat their shine, which does in effect kill the children. So they murder children to take basically their magic and eat it, which gives them magic and gives them immortality. So Danny is dealing with all of that. We do get like a little bit of what had happened to his mom after everything that happens in The Shining. We do get to travel back to the Overlook and see what's happened there. Of the newer things, this is absolutely 100% my favorite. It had me beginning to end, even with as chunky as it is. I also enjoyed the movie, but if you watched the movie, they completely changed the end, which I had a feeling when I read this that they were gonna have to do that, and they did exactly what I thought they were gonna do. I wish they'd have just stayed true to the book for how the book ends. I thought the book ending was just as action-packed and just as scary and just as over the top, but I digress. I really like this. I really like the character of Danny. One suggestion, if you haven't read this, and if you haven't read The Shining, or if you haven't read it in a while, do a back-to-back for October and for spooky season. I think that would be a lot of fun to watch this little boy grow into this man and to have that story continue straight through. I think you'd really enjoy it, and I think you'd really enjoy this. It's phenomenal. For my next pick, we go into a haunted house, or more specifically, we go into a Gothic haunted house. I have a second Silvia Moreno-Garcia on this list, and this is Mexican Gothic. This is so good. This is the Gothic horror genre done chef's kiss to me. I absolutely loved this. This is the story of a young woman who is not an idiot, but her cousin kind of is. Her cousin is the one who got swept off her feet, married into a family with this big old Gothic manor. She goes to live with them and all of a sudden stops communicating with her family, which is not a thing in this family. They are very close. They care very much for each other. So our heroine in this book goes to the big old Gothic, maybe it's haunted, who knows what's going on house, because she's trying to make sure that her cousin is okay. And all sorts of absolute over-the-top craziness happens in this house. Some of it's kind of gross, some of it's really scary. There's lots, but she can't just, whoop, I'm out, because she can't leave her cousin there. So there's good explanation as to why she stays in this house, and it makes total sense, and it is so well done. I really love this, and so I'm gonna say it's edged to the top. It's my favorite Gothic, and definitely my favorite Gothic horror. I wouldn't say Rebecca is Gothic horror. Rebecca's just Gothic, but absolutely my favorite Gothic horror. So well done. If you haven't read this and you like Gothic horror and you can stand really gross, give it a shot. You will love it. And my next pick is monsters, because here there be monsters, or maybe the monsters are people. I know, but I'm not telling you. This is Jimmy Juliano's Dead 11, and it is the story of basically a cult that lives on a tiny island off the coast. They live by a very strict set of rules because maybe they're saving the world from monsters, or maybe the monsters are telling them what to do. Maybe you should read it to find out, because it's really good. It's super heavy with suspense. It's super heavy with foreboding. It's got that like sense of dread. Every time I picked up the book, it just sent me back to this like, I don't know what I'm gonna see and I don't know what I'm gonna read, but I'm feeling it. That was this book. So if you like heavy atmosphere, if you are okay with not knowing until the end, not knowing for sure what's really there or what's not really there, and you can handle that total sense of dread and suspense throughout a fairly long book, then you will love this. So I so strongly suggest that you give it a shot. So I hope that was fun, and I hope you enjoyed that. I don't read a ton of horror. I don't do the really graphic over the top stuff, but I loved every one of those books, and I think that you would too. So in the meantime, I hope that you have an absolutely wonderful week. And I hope that you get to read some absolutely amazing books, maybe some really spooky ones. Bye, y'all.